In this section, we're going to talk about establishing room rates. So there's really three ways that you can establish room rates. One is called the market positioning statement, where we're going to look at, actually the three ways are this, market condition approach, the rule of thumb approach, and the Hubbard formula. So the next few slides are going to discuss each one of these. So the market condition approach is what we would term a common sense approach. And basically, it's the most often used, but it has some problems, which I'll get into in a second. Basically, what you're going to look at is your competitors' rates. So you're going to look around in your neighborhood, or you're going to look around in the city and determine who your competitors are, and you see what rates they have. It doesn't really take into account that your property might be newer than theirs, or their property might be newer than yours, but it's just kind of a quick look at the market to determine what you think you should charge based on what your competition is charging. The problems are that it allows that local market to determine your rates. So you shouldn't really count on this totally by itself. The second way that we're going to look at is called the rule of thumb approach. And with the rule of thumb, it's pretty simple. You set the minimum average room rate at $1 for each $1,000 of construction and furnishing costs per room. With this, it assumes that there's a 75% occupancy. So a quick example is if you spend $125,000 in construction, then you would charge $125 per room per night. This has a problem that it doesn't take into account inflation. So the next one, with the rule of thumb, we're also going to look at how it kind of compares with some of the other segments. So for example, the average per room cost for a hotel development in the budget economy is about $53,000, which makes sense. $53 a night for a budget economy room makes sense. Mid-scale, $85. Mid-scale with food and beverage, $103. Full scale. And then luxury resorts is much higher because they have a lot more facilities. But generally speaking, this rule of thumb works in most markets for these different hotel segments. This is just another example of showing you how the construction cost per square foot, for example, in New York, the construction cost per square foot is $217. So New York's average daily rate's a little bit higher than that, but generally speaking, this also works as a rule of thumb. And that's just it. It just kind of gives you a guideline of where your room rates should be. The more complex way to look at your room rates is the Hubbard formula. And it's considered to be a bottom-up approach. So what that means is that we're going to determine how much our desired profit is and then work our way up based on our expected return on investment. So what it calculates is your average room rate based on how much departmental revenue you should have and how many rooms you should sell. And it's just trying to get a target average price for what your room should sell. This is an example of the Hubbard formula. It's pretty complex. We're not going to get into this very much. Basically, I just want to show that you determine that you want to have a 15% return on investment, and you do all of these calculations. You come up with a $164 average rate, and that equates to a $1 million return on investment. So we don't really worry too much about this, but if you were doing this in the real world, you would calculate all of these based on your taxes and your cost to determine what the average rate should be. The main thing to remember with establishing any of the room rates is that you should use a combination of all three of these. You should look at the local market. You should then look at the rule of thumb to make sure that you're in the same general area, and then do the detailed calculations of the Hubbard formula. As long as all three of those are generally speaking, the same area, then that's a good rate to charge. If you look at the two and the local economy is saying $150, the rule of thumb is saying $150, but you run all the Hubbard formula and it's saying like $300, then that's really not a good investment because you're not going to be able to make any money because the Hubbard formula is going to show that you can't make much money from that. So the main thing to take away from this is that the best way to establish your roommates is to use a combination of all three: the market, the rule of thumb, and the Hubbard formula. In the next section, we're going to talk about how to evaluate front office operations, but this was the section on how to establish room rates.